Is that bright, or is that light back of me too bright for y'all?
I mean, you look like an angel.
I'll take it.
Podcast.
Digital 410 proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast. And we were back after a long delay, thanks to the fine people over at T-Mobile. Let me say this, I've been a customer at T-Mobile for 15 years, so I think I paid my due to speak on behalf of Jeff and his family, saying, nice job with the maintenance, fellas. But now that Jeff's back online and Texas is back into the 2023 year, we are back with a brand new episode, and joining us, as always, from Texas, Mr. Jeff Copsetta. Jeff, how you doing tonight, sir?
Man, like I said, blessing in disguise. Thanks, T-Mobile. It's been great, but I'm enjoying my 5G.
5G and a cheaper bill.
Cheaper bill. I mean, it's country living, right? I live out here in the hill country, God's country. You can't always get 5G. But when they tell you you're not going to have cell service for the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. We're living in a recession. Some could argue an early form of depression. Gas prices and prices in general through the roof. And I just so happen to start looking at some Great Depression photos lately. You know what I noticed, Jeff, before we bring on our guest? No matter how,
cell service either.
No cell service. Don't even get me started on, streaming through Netflix. It was an atrocity. But regardless of how downtrodden and poor and hard time having those cats were having, 98% of them still clean shaven. It's like these guys found an old rusty razor to sharpen every one of them. You'd see the occasional pencil mustache, but with the exception of, I looked through hundreds of photos. I think I saw 3 to 4 people with a 5 o'clock shadow, and that was it. I mean, no matter how bad it got, they still had enough pride in their appearance to get up and just shave. And so I think it says a lot.
Time, man. Different time.
Why don't you
I
introduce...
bet you they all huddled around a radio, too.
Speaking of radio, the good old days, I take a little pride in saying that I got to work in radio as it was dying. It hadn't quite died yet, but I got to see the end of the good old days. And our guest here is kind of trying to recreate the real good old days, but in a digital format. Why don't you introduce our guest tonight, Jeff?
Yeah, so I am really happy to introduce Ray Liotta. I said Ray Liotta. Tony Liotta. Sorry, guys.
No relation.
Tony Liotta, no relation, even spelled differently. Tony, we've been kind of following each other on social media here for a while now, and I don't know what took me so long to look up what is WLVN 1940s Radio. And I don't know. It hit me one day. I'm going to see exactly what this is. Life-changing for World War II historians, aficionados, living historians. What Ray What Tony does.
It's my nickname. I
Anthony.
answer to Ray as well.
Is unbelievable. I'm going to quit talking so Tony can tell us more about WLVN 1940s Radio.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Don. So basically, WLVN 1940s Radio started about 2 years ago. A buddy of mine, and I'd actually had a thought of doing this for so long, but a buddy of mine that I worked with on the railroad here in Montana, he is a 1940s enthusiast as well, and really does live the 1940s life 24/7. He's an even bigger antique collector than I am. I mean, I even got my wife into, the 1940s. Almost our whole house is decked out in the 1940s. My house is from 1908.
Nice.
So it's for, this radio station is for people that want to immerse themselves more into the 1940s lifestyle, and it's also for the people that enjoy the music. This is some of the music that I found is music that wasn't on the top charts on XM radio, or wasn't sold on CDs. And to be honest, some of the songs I found too, surprisingly, some of them were pretty raunchy that I couldn't really play on the radio, very surprisingly. So
well,
about 2 years ago,
technically you could play it after 10 p.m. because then it's safe harbor.
Exactly. I'll remember that. Maybe I'll add that. Maybe I'll add those into the lineup.
Real quick before you get to the next point, for people listening at home, like, so what? You throw a bunch of 40s songs on playlists. What differentiates what you guys do versus someone streaming a pre-configured playlist on another provider?
Yep.
Which
So,
I think sets you apart, and I love this. This is the most original part of your idea. This is what separates you from everything else, in my opinion.
And I bet you're talking about the commercials.
Well, just the fact that you basically, when you started on a certain day in what, 1941?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I know.
That
Yeah.
part.
So we started in, right now it's 1943 on the radio station. We started in 1940. And basically the shows that you would hear on Friday night or on Sunday night, Jack Benny on August, actually he's on vacation right now, so you would not hear him, but I followed the schedule that was back in 1943.
And I think that's very, not to step on you, but I think it's very important because that is exactly what separates you from just listening to, a Spotify playlist or a Pandora where you're going to hear the same 38 songs. You are like listening to 1943's radio in real time, day to day.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that took me about 2 years to get all of the music together. I've got over 25,000 files of music and radio shows, commercials, news, and I'm collecting even more. I've found people that have news stories from that time that I've never found, and so you pay a little bit of money and you get those files, and I'm able to put them onto my radio station, news events that people probably hadn't even heard of. And it's not even war stuff. It could be just regular news events, but that's what immerses more into the 1940s lifestyle. Because not always did you have war news. You had news about the economy. You had news about things that were going on around the world other than the war.
I'm hoping one day someone presents to you and you can play it like the local cattle auction from Iowa in 1944 to see what the big heifers were going for at that time.
Yeah.
The local farm report.
Every year I actually found the All-Star games and the World Series games as complete as they can be, from 40 to 45. So there, on some of them, there are some days that are missing, like there will be World Series game 1, then 3, 4, and 5 or whatnot. But yeah, as complete as I can make it, I make it as realistic as I can.
You're talking about some of the songs being a little raunchy, and because we nowadays think, oh, that's old-fashioned music. It was all, bow ties, lollipops, and going to the soda stand. But if anyone has actually listened to any, even just Andrew's Sisters, that's as basic as it gets as far as people's reference to 1940s. They got a song, I forget the title, but essentially the chorus is all is fair in love and war, and they're basically advising you as a young lady to go out and get that young boy down the street before Sally does, because she's going to beat you to it. And hey, it's any girl's game at this point.
Yeah.
Any boy you see is up for grabs. I mean, there's a lot of, sexually, they just sang it in a backhanded way to get around the
Well,
censorship.
even rum and Coca-Cola.
Yep.
If you listen to that very carefully,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yep.
know, what's it saying? So yeah, and like I said, about 2 years ago, I had a buddy that was really immersed in the 1940s world, and he had he had a 1935 Emerson, I believe, and he was playing his playlist on his radio through an AM transmitter, and I've got
Nice.
one connected to my radios as well. And he goes, I really wish that there was a radio station where there was random songs and you knew what programs were coming on, because there are some great 1940s radio stations out there, XM Radio,
Sure.
1940s.com, UK 1940s radio, but they're not as realistic as some people will want them.
Exactly. I was going to say the one thing, the only thing about your radio station, it's not a bad thing, but for people who want, especially, perfect example, Jeff's has probably done this or seen people do this, living history events. Someone will go out and get like a old desktop radio that's dead, and they'll tear the insides out and they'll put a Bluetooth speaker for their phones in it. Maybe it's made of, the plastic or Bakelite, and then they'll just put up a playlist on whether it's YouTube or Pandora or whatever, and they'll have the Andrews Sisters and Benny Goodman and all that playing in the background, but then the Geico commercial comes on. It brings everybody, with the exception of you advertising for your own radio station. You don't get the, go out and get your new switch from T-Mobile over to Verizon. It doesn't take people out of that. And so if someone's trying to create that authentic, immersive environment, that's another great reason for people to stream your radio station to their Bluetooth speaker that they have stuffed in a 1940s radio on a table at a museum during a living history event.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually a living history group in New Mexico. Arizona, the Arizona Ground Crew, Living History. And they do a kind of a boot camp every year for new members or whatnot. And I think it's either this year or next year. I haven't heard from him in a while, but I'm going to create shows for that area that they're in. And I believe it's I forget the airfield's name, but somewhere in New Mexico. It's where the first atom bomb was flown out of. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create commercials and maybe some news events of that area that will immerse them even further into the immersion. So
that was, we're on the same page, because I'm just thinking in my head, that'd be cool. It'd take a lot of getting together ahead of time. But for example, just hypothetically, we have an event up in Fort Morgan in November. That'd be awesome if you have a news report. This is right now in Fort Morgan, Alabama, the Marine Corps collective, blah, 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 blah. And so if they're playing it at the event and people are walking around like, what?
Yeah.
And so you could just do real-time broadcasts of the, the formation of the Marine Corps in Fort Morgan, Alabama this weekend for, exercise and weapons training and things like that.
Yeah.
That's just awesome.
Exactly. Or, another idea I had for that event is kind of like a G.I. Jill thing. Make up names from, this is from the Arizona Ground Crew, FPO, whatever, requesting song, Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree by the Andrews Sisters, stuff like that. So it's in the works right now. It's very, very, very skinned down, but
well, we usually put the plugs in at the end, but just because we're in real time and someone's dry and listening, like, oh, that's a good idea. We got an event coming up in February. If someone want to reach out to you and try to organize something like that, where could they email you at?
Oh, so they can email me at WLVNradio at gmail.com, or you can go to our website at WLVN1940s Radio.com.
And so back to it, you had a friend who lives in a 1940s themed house. He's got an AM broadcast hooked up to his computer. He said, check this out. And you're like, somebody should do something with that.
I mean, the main thing that he said to me was, I wish we could find a radio station that was just like in the 1940s. And that's when the idea kind of just went, you know what? I've been thinking about it. Let's put it in gear. And that's when I started, collecting all the files, getting it, finding out how to actually do a radio station and getting it on air. And it's been a blast ever since. It takes some time, it takes some effort, but if you have the love for it, it's all fun, and a very, very, very supportive wife.
Yeah, exactly. Now, are you doing that through an RSS feed?
I'm sorry?
Are you doing that through an RSS feed?
Yeah, so I go through radio.co, and then I also have a DJ system on my computer that transfers that broadcasts through radio.co.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, you have any questions before I talk for another 10 minutes, as I have to do?
Well, I mean, no, this is great because what you do is so very American, right? We figure out that there's a need for something, and there's something that doesn't exist, and we create it. And that's exactly what you did. It's exactly what we did, that's what made us victorious in the Second World War, right? This type of American entrepreneurship that we have an idea, let's make it happen. And you did. And I can't tip my hat to you enough because as a living historian, as somebody who really, now look, I am stuck in 2023, unfortunately, with what I do for a living and everything else, right? Real world still kicks in. I'm not like a single guy and I can just be in the 1940s all day. No offense to anybody who is, there's no escaping it, right? But there are times where I want to immerse myself, and there, Sirius XM's 1940s radio, 40s junction. It's been great. It used to be 40s on 4, 40s on 4. Now It's on 71, like you said. Then there were times where I would go to it like, why is this Pitbull? Why is Pitbull singing on the 40s? Oh, it moved somewhere else. So like you said, and I've seen how TCM, Turner Classic Movies, has had to deal with some things. I'm fearful that there's not enough drive in the U.S. to keep this stuff going. And I wanted, like you had mentioned, I wanted a deeper experience. And I don't know if Don even knows this, but I'm also a big model railroader. Me and my dad have a very, very large model railroad up in his house that there's a whole room dedicated to it, right? And it's all 1950s. So when we're open for a state tour and we're open for a national tour. So when we're open for tour, we may have 30, 40 people come through for the weekend. And to really immerse yourself, I put together I wouldn't call it a playlist because I'm not even that technologically advanced, but I had some songs from the 50s, right? And you gotta be careful because a lot of Ricky Nelson stuff is more like the 60s, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I wanted to make sure there was a lot more songs that were 1959 and above than I realized. I thought that was a 50s hit, but so I went through and really got those real good malt shop memories, the Cordells, the Ponytails, Cookie Burns, people like that. But then I would every 5 or 6 songs, then I would have Colgate tooth powder commercial, or the new Plymouth, or blue whatever coal for your home, and I always wanted something like that for the 1940s.
Yep.
I wish I'd have found you guys 2 years ago. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's amazing. You're sitting on a gold mine. It's probably not paying like a gold mine, but it really is, man. I mean, it really, it's the next level stuff that people like us, living historians, I mean, I listen to it when I'm building my scale model aircraft, if I'm reading my books. And the beauty of it is radio was such an important part of that generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you pick up any book, any memoir from World War II, they're talking about the latest Bing Crosby.
It's the internet of the day.
Really crooning them out, right?
Exactly.
And some of those ditties, like you said, that are a little risque. I mean, I had no idea. I just, not too long ago, I was like, what the heck is frim fram sauce? What is frim fram sauce? What's your FIFO on the side? And then you look it up and they're like, basically talking about, this is what they want,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's no recipe for frim fram sauce. This is a risque, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that was a big part of the culture. I mean, we listened to radio a lot. That was part of it.
Up until recently, yeah.
During the Great Depression, like Don said, these guys are clean shaven, and I bet you they huddled around the radio. That was them scrolling, like we do today. What's the news feed? What's going on? They're huddled up against the radio.
Well, and that was their social time too. That's where everybody. Back then, there was no TVs, there was no video games, there was no social media, there was no handheld phones. So the way that you got news was either by talking to somebody or sitting around listening to the radio with other people. That was the social media. That was their social media, getting together, listening to the radio together. And, in the evenings, and this is what I do on my radio station too. In the evenings, that's when the family got together. You sat down, you ate dinner, and then afterwards, Jack Benny, Burns and Allen, you had all the family the family favorites radio shows, and the whole family sat together, listened, and laughed. You didn't have one kid upstairs on the computer, one kid on his phone, crying because he can't get internet. If they weren't outside playing, if kids weren't outside playing, or if people weren't outside socializing, they were listening to the radio. They were catching up on news events and social events. And that's what I think about when I was creating this. I was thinking about the people that do live the 1940s style or do want to immerse themselves in it. They'll have their families around the radio listening to these shows. I get letters from I got a letter from a woman whose two sons love the Lone Ranger. They listen to the Lone Ranger religiously, and I have a YouTube page as well. So if you missed the weekly show, I post it onto YouTube. So all the weekly radio shows I post onto YouTube, and people can go to YouTube and listen to the weekly shows there. And I work for the railroad, and we've had a couple mishaps here in Montana that has taken my time away from it. And so I'm a couple months behind, but I'm slowly catching up. But, I've had people email, hey, is everything okay? We haven't seen an update, or we haven't seen this. Is everything okay? Are you okay?
Time to onboard your wife.
I'm just busy.
That's a good point real quick. Give us a quick rundown. So people can listen to the Lone Ranger on your station. What's some of the other shows that people may have heard of or haven't heard of that you play on a consistent basis that people can tune into weekly?
Yeah, so you have the Lone Ranger, Cavalcade of America, Burns and Allen, Jack Benny, The Great Gildersleeve. On Sundays, I have to try and find some more, but on Sundays we had Suspense, Lights Out. So it's a very wide range. And then as I find the news broadcasts, I add those in as well. But Superman was a big one in nice. 4041, and then I believe they stopped for a couple months, and then people got into uproar about Superman's not on, so they brought it back. So there is actually a time, I believe it was in 41, where Superman actually was not on the radio anymore. And then they brought it back, and I was able to find more files than that. But I play shows for the kids. I play shows for the adults. The scary shows, Suspense, Lights Out, always make sure that I play those at night, just like they did back in the day. And so what I do is I go to Radio Magazine. And in the back of Radio Magazine, and you can find it on the internet, at the very back of Radio Magazine, you have a schedule of the radio shows for that month. So anytime that I'm putting together my schedule, I always go to the Radio Magazine and make sure that I'm playing it at the right time or close to the right time that it played back in 1943. Some shows I can't find on Radio Magazine, so I kind of just place them in places where I think people would be interested in hearing them.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because you fall into a interesting digital realm, and that is, very few people know this. Licensing on content, especially music, isn't per song, it's per the actual recording, meaning who owned the recording when that version that you're listening to is recorded. Mm-hmm. And most of them are radio or A&Rs. But most modern day copyright policies didn't come into play until 1962. And so the offhand rule of thumb is any music prior to 1962, chances are won't have a licensing on it. You can get away with playing it, streaming online, unless somebody has remastered it and re-recorded it. And then here we are. So my question to you is, so you fall clearly in the realm of pre-recording licensing, but you also fall right smack dab in purely analog. And so the only access to digital stuff you're going to have is either people who's recorded it, radio stations that's found old records and recorded it, or hobbyists who've taken their record players and ran them through a capture device and recorded their grandparents' old records. So how did you go about acquiring your ever-growing catalog? And obviously we don't care about figures, but how much of it did you kind of run into, okay, it's not licensed, but somebody did spend time and record it, and they're, how much of it did you come across easily, and some of it you're like, oh, is it really worth that to have this in my catalog?
Yeah, and looking at that, so I want to say about 90% of it I found on archives.org.
Nice.
You can go to archives.org and download a lot of the shows that they have there, a lot of the music, and then I also have a license through BMI for the music. So that's where I get most of my music from.
So you don't have to worry about those phone calls and those.
Yeah, exactly, and that also protects the people that play my music as well. If somebody wants to play it for an event or wants to play it in their store, the music that's coming straight from my feed is licensed and protected.
People don't realize that. Every once in a while, BMI might, hey, we need to scrape up some revenue. Let's send some agents out to local bars and see if they're paying for the licenses on their jukebox. And that's
exactly
that is a thing.
Yeah, and when I first started, I actually did not know about the 100-year license. Like a lot of the music has a 100-year license on it. So when I first started, I'm like, hey, everybody will love this. This is fun. And boom, I put it on there without even thinking or actually knowing too much about the radio world or the music world, anything like that, until somebody had said something about licensing. I'm like, maybe I should look this up. So I looked it up. I figured, hey, 1940s music, it should be, it's 80 years old. It should be it should be public, public
unless
music.
You come across that one track that was redigitized in 1994.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, you know what, to be safe, I don't think anybody's really going to raise a fuss about it being in 1940s music, but just to be safe. And if somebody is playing my music station in a store or event and whatnot, I want them to be protected as well. So I just paid the money for the license, and now I don't have to worry about it.
I see it as a sign that we're starting to get more traffic on this website because I've gotten 2 emails from the fine people at the image copyright. I got an email about, on 9/11, I posted a picture of the Twin Towers. I got hey, either you need to pay for a license or take that down. I'm like, hey, we're getting enough traffic there. We're showing up on these sort of things. So clearly I took the photo down. I wasn't going to pay for it. But I'm like, yes, we're gaining traction, boys. They're looking out for us. They care if we're putting copyright images up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Some people are funny about that, and other people, most everybody, because I have a Facebook group as well. You can look at it's 1940s Radio, WLVN1940s Radio Facebook group. And, I asked people on there, I said, hey, I'm going to have to shut this down for a little bit until I get my license because I want to do things the right way. I want to do things the legal way. And, I got 95% of the comments on there was like, hey, just, nobody's going to care if it's 1940s music. But you could have that one inspector go around and want to raise something, and all of a sudden whoever's playing my music could get in trouble or send me a letter to stop and desist. So just to be safe and allow my listeners to continue enjoying the radio station, I just went ahead and got the license.
How early do you go? Because keep in mind, it's 1940s radio, but you can listen to 2023 radio and they're going to throw in that track from 1987 every once in a while. Do you ever throw like a 1932 song in there? I mean, how early do you go?
So I go from 1940 to 45. So all of the music and all of the radio shows that I have and news and commercials are from between 40 to 45, the war years. Basically, I want to focus on the war years.
But if you do need to fill space, it would not be unauthentic to throw a 39 song in there because at that time they would have been playing the hits from 5-6 years before. So.
Oh yeah. So everything is from 45 and beyond. From 38 and beyond, it's kind of hard to find good sounding music and radio shows. But for a while there, when Jack Benny was on vacation, I would play his shows from 38 and 39 as a filler, reruns. Mainly I focus between 40 and 45.
Jeff was talking earlier about the importance of radio of the time and the era. And here's all you need to know. And I never really thought about it until I heard a Korean War vet talk about this. When the Korean War vets came back from the Korean War, they were surprised at the lack of welcome home parades. They didn't have large crowds like we had in World War II. And you think, well, it wasn't the same thing. No, television was invented. And so in the 40s and World War II, people came out to see the spectacle that they're hearing about on the radio. But now they can sit at home and watch it on TV. And so when the guys came back from Korean War, they got to the docks kind of expecting the same welcome back that their brothers or their fathers got, depending on their age. And it's like, oh, no one cares because they're watching it at home on TV. And so prior to the advent of TV, radio was it.
Yep, exactly. And if you go on my webpage, the first thing I have on is my YouTube introduction, and it really explains how much of a staple radio was back then. I mean, it was a lifeline. You couldn't call, like here we dial a 1 and then 3 numbers, and we can call Washington D.C. or we can call Michigan or we could call New York with no problem. To call long distance back then, it was a hassle. So the only way that you felt connected to the other side of the world or the other side of the United States was through radio.
Well, and speaking about the other side of the world, or especially across the pond, we were kind of talking a little bit before the air before we came on the air, you've got probably maybe just as many or more listeners in Europe than here. And that's an interesting dynamic that we come across more than once on this show with World War II vehicle restoration projects. In England, you get Jeep parts, no problem, uniform pieces. And I think Don really says it best, is the evidence of the war is still there. So yeah, it's interesting to hear that also there's a need for WLVN across the Atlantic as well.
Yes. And, I look at my analytics on my radio station, and I've got 5 or 6 people that have the radio station on for, it's been over 500 or 600 hours that they've had the radio station just running the whole time. And that's why I created the radio station. So you can just flip on your radio and here's the music. You don't have to connect to a Bluetooth and do this and do that. If people know how to set up their antique radios with an AM transmitter and then tune the radio into that transmitter, you can have 1940s radio playing 24/7. All you have to do is click on your radio and it comes on just like in the old days.
Explain how that works.
So
yes,
I have.
Explain how that works.
Is that through the app?
Yeah. So you can buy on eBay. It's an AM transmitter. It's a little box like this, and I have a Bluetooth receiver connected into that. That's receiving from my computer. Gotcha. So my computer is transferring into the AM transmitter, and then the AM transmitter is tuned into my antique radio.
Like the real estate people use when you pull in front of an open house. It's turn into AM 120, and you can. And this house is 3 bedrooms with 2 baths, restored in 1974. Yep. Yeah, I got you.
I think they call that talking house. I tried one of those AM transmitters and it didn't work too well for me. But they're very finicky. You can't have a lot of electric static around it, so you have to place it in an area of your house where you don't get a lot of electric intrusion.
That'd be cool if someone made an app that actually your phone transmitted a 20-foot AM signal, so you could just tune in on that. That'd be pretty damn cool.
That would be great. Yeah,
just make one.
There you go. Well, it's funny you say that. If you obviously a lot of our audience are living historians, but if you go online and like Google vintage 1940s clothes, not World War II uniforms, not living history, but like, I want to get me a nice 1940s era suit. A lot of the modern day authentic reproduction clothing are on European websites. Definitely. There's I don't know if it's their form of hipsters over there for young kids. Hey, instead of wearing skinny jeans, I'm going to dress like my great grandparents did. I don't know if it's a thing over there or it's definitely a lifestyle, but yes, there's way more interest in that era of clothing, music, and everything than there is here.
Oh yeah, big time. Most of my clothes, I've got it, and my wife always makes fun of me for it. But I have high rise pants, high hip pants, and it really to wear those pants. I know it's just pants, but to wear those pants, it feels like you're really immersed into that world. And a lot of people don't realize. She makes fun of me. She says, "Oh, you're wearing grandpa's pants." But
Anthony's like, if it doesn't have an 18-inch zipper, don't even bring it over here.
Exactly. But a lot of people don't realize that was the style back then. they wore their pants on their actual waist.
Yep, over the belly
not on
button.
yeah, over the belly button. That's, in the military, where do they tape you? They tape you around the belly button. They don't wear it in what we call a waist nowadays.
Yep, it's funny because I've been to probably a lot of times tactical events, but I've been to 3 events where someone will be sagging their HBTs or their airborne pants, and they inevitably rip the crotches at them because they're hanging down. It's like, no, you got to bring the crotch up to your crotch, and then it's not hanging down, and then they won't blow out. You got to pull them up. You got to wear them, and it's funny because people in the 80s and 90s, why do all people wear their pants up to their belly buttons? Because that's the way they wore them when they're 20. Just like now you're seeing girls walking around like they did in 1993, and they still have the shrub on the front of their head. Like, yo, it's 2023, cut the shrub off. But, some people just stop in their era, and that's the way it is.
Exactly.
So
Well, say what you will about Grandpa, but he kicked some butt in the 1940s. So,
yeah,
was with him.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I definitely would not. No, my grandpa was a duck driver on D-Day, so I definitely would not. Definitely would not mess with. I got to, when I was in middle school, I did a report on him, and I actually was able to get his journal that he had during the war. And I think my uncle has it now. But a lot of stories, one story that he has in there is, and my grandfather, huge TV watcher. I would go over to his house with my dad as a kid, and he would have 3 TVs on at the same time. One is Jeopardy, one is Price is Right, one game show nut. But he loved movies, he loved TV. And this one night they're having a movie showing, and his buddies want him to go to the theater with them. But he goes, no, I don't feel like it tonight. I'm just going to work extra, driving supplies back and forth from the ship to beach. Well, that night, a buzz bomb came over and landed on that theater and killed every single person in that theater.
Wow.
Yeah. And talk about lucky.
Wow.
Yeah, decision making at the last minute.
Yeah, and this, I'm telling you, I don't think I've met anybody else in my life that loved television or movies so much. And he's like, no, I don't feel like it tonight, guys, and I'm just going to work some more, bring some more supplies to the shore, and then that happened. So. You never know.
Yep.
You never know when you get that gut feeling. I'm an instructor with the railroad, and I tell all of my new hires, I said, if you get a gut feeling about something, that's something that you need to follow. Being in the military, you follow your gut feelings. So.
It's funny. I didn't realize until recently. I seen them as a kid, but I never wore one. But yeah, for you living historians out there, your dark and light shade HPT hats are nothing more than a train conductor hat minus the stripes, and it's all green. Same ring, same short bill, same 6 peaks. It's basically a train conductor hat made out of different material.
Oh yeah. I had my engineer hat when I was an engineer. Had my dark blue bibs, my light blue shirt, and my what do they call them? A laborer's hat.
What is that? What material is that made out of? That's made out of the, is that seersucker? Oh, it looks like one of the seersucker suits that doesn't wrinkle with the stripes on it.
Yeah.
Looks very similar to that. So how many songs do you have in your catalog right now, whether they're in rotation or not?
Or
I guess I should say, to modernize it, how many gigs, how many terabytes of files do you have on your hard drive?
Let's see. I can bring that up right now. Songs. The last time I looked, I believe it was 12,000.
No, not to get too buried in the weeds, but I did work in terrestrial radio, and at the time they hadn't upgraded the software yet, and it was a little out of date, meaning that it wasn't AI like the new software. And once again, I'm not trying to go in the weeds, but when the program director would fill out his day of music in commercial spots, he would fill it out where it's 24 hours long. But songs, they fade into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have like 0.5 seconds or half a second, those half a second of fades add up. And so by the end of the day, now you're
Big
like,
time.
oh, I got to find 38 seconds or I'm going to have dead air. And so when we have a live radio show and my host would go on vacation and I would edit best ofs to, okay, I need 25 minutes here, 7 minutes worth of commercial break here and 15 minutes here. But starting at 2, then around 5:45, I would have to come up with about, a minute and a half worth of content, because commercials fade over top each other. They fade in. There's an overlap, and that time builds up. Nowadays, they have software that figures that all out, and they have files that they automatically choose from. But when you're planning your daily schedule, and you're like, okay, I need content from 12 a.m. to 12 p.m., does the way you do it, are they overlapping? Do you find that you have to come up with 38 seconds worth of filler at the end of the day?
No, actually, I use a really good program called Play It Live.
Okay.
And so I just load all of my music into that system, and it's got a program to where you can create clocks. So my one clock is at 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes I plug in a commercial, and then every 30 minutes I plug in my 30-minute station ID. And then at 45 minutes, I plug in another commercial. And then at the top of the hour, I plug in my station ID again. And then everything is just automatically filled with songs. So usually it's about Saturday or Sundays when I plug in my shows for the week. So I'll do a whole week, or if I'm feeling really bored, then I'll just do the whole month and then not have to worry about it for the rest of the month. So then I'll just take the show and plug in the show from my computer files into that DJ station, and it automatically gets rid of the songs that will be playing during that time. And it automatically adjusts when it needs to shut off or when it needs to go a little longer. And I can manually do that too by putting in page breaks. So I can put in a hard page break. So with my station IDs, at 30 minutes, I've got a hard break there. So no matter what song is playing or how long it's playing, at 30 minutes, it stops the song and then starts my station ID. Same thing with the top of the hour. I have the Glenn Miller show that plays at 7 o'clock every evening, Monday through Friday. So whatever song is playing at 6:59 p.m., it stops right at 1900 or 7 p.m. and plays the Glenn Miller shows.
Jeff, do you know why radio stations have to do a station ID at the top in every half hour? Most basic reason. Pull something out of the air.
No clue.
It's so that when someone gets offended, they can stick around long enough to find out what radio station it is so they can complain to the FCC. It's basically it. I was driving down 41 and I heard this curse word and I didn't think they should play it at that time, so I had to stick around until the top of the hour to find out who the radio station is so I could write a sternly written letter. It's exactly what it's for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, thinking about when going back a little bit, but you talked about your little intro. What is 3 minutes maybe? That talks about the importance of radio when you go. Man, that is pristine. I've played that many times, and when I first got on there, that's what I hit, thinking that was the radio show, and then it stopped. I'm like, what the heck happened? I'm like, oh, that was just a little intro thing. That is so well done. I would love to see is there a way we could link that on What's the Scuttle's website and stuff?
Yeah, we can include
that. That is just
I'll take
it's
cool.
It's on my YouTube page, so if you guys need to use it, how about it?
Yeah, we'll embed it into the page on WTSPWorldWar2.com. Speaking of which, yes, if you have an app, there's multiple apps, but how I do it at work, and you don't want to download extra apps, is just go to WLVN1940s Radio.com, and you scroll down, you hit play, and it plays right from the browser. And like I was explaining when you and I were talking last week, when Jeff was nowhere to be found, I listen to your station at work because what I find is obviously a lot of the 40 stuff is instrumental, but some of it does have singing. But I find I can turn it down low enough that it doesn't, because I'm an IT guy and I'm reading support tickets all day and working on servers, but I can play it in the background and it doesn't distract me like modern day songs do. And, whether it's funny, my boss walked in one day, I didn't have my earbuds on, I was just coming on radio. He's like, it sounds like the 1920s. Well, you're off by 20 years, but close enough.
Yeah. And it's easy to read to as well. Yeah, I'm a big reader, and I could sit out on my porch put the 1940s music on and read at the same time and not be distracted. But if there's certain music that my wife likes the newer age music, so if she's listening to newer age music, or she loves the 80s, so she listens to her 80s music, that's kind of, I don't know what it is, but it's harder to concentrate while reading when listening to that kind of music. I don't know if it's just the tone. The 40s music was more of a softer tone, and it had a good beat to it. So your mind really got into a beat, just like when you're reading. It's almost like the same beat when you're reading. And it's more of a mellow tone than some of the modern music.
So you can come home, you can take off your work clothes, you put on your smoking jacket, get yourself a nice 3 fingers of bourbon, and turn on WLVN 1940s radio and just sit there and ponder today's activities.
And that's why I created this station.
Let me ask you this. Radio, TV, all the way up until 83, 84, after Johnny Carson had sign-off. Did radios in the 40s have sign-off times, or were they 24 hours a day?
As far as I can find, they were 24 hours a day.
Maybe not in the smaller towns, but like New York, Chicago, they probably
yeah, smaller town, they definitely had, I'm sure they definitely had shut-off times. I haven't really done too much research on that, but I know in the big cities, I mean, you had music playing at 2, 3 in the morning. You had night shift workers, so of course NBC and whatever catered to the night workers in the big cities and whatnot. But yeah, definitely small towns. I'm sure there's probably this is the end of the radio broadcast for today. Everybody have a great night and play the national anthem or whatnot. But
yeah, I guess when 98% of your demographic are farmers and they're going to bed at 8 p.m., there's no reason to pay someone to play music to nobody in the middle of the night, because they didn't have automated systems. You had to pay someone to drop that needle.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the radio stations, I live in a rural area here in Montana, and the city that I lived in before, Livingston, Montana, had an old radio station out there from the late 1940s, early 1950s, and it's a small station. It's not like a huge corporate building. It's just a one or two room station, probably manned by just 1 or 2 people. And once the workday was done, that was it.
Absolutely. Before the show come on, for the people watching on YouTube, over Jeff's shoulder, he has a 1943 Philco.
Well, so from 39 to 41, it was essentially the same model. Mine on the back in grease pen, I'm assuming it's an inspection date, maybe. It says 12-5-41.
I'm surprised there's not a label. Chances are on your major components, there's probably a label in there. Because I have a Philco, a 31 Philco, and there's a label that actually has the copyright date on it.
There's several copyright dates on this label, if I remember, and they run from 39, 40, and 41.
Very
so,
cool.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a neat find. And you plug it in, it lights up, it squelches. I could pick up some AM, believe it or not. I'm really interested on Tony's idea, though, with a little deal to kind of put WLVN just
the AM transmitter. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And as crazy as it sounds, and this will mean absolutely nothing to modern people, how cool is it to hear your sterile digitized song get a little warmth to it from the tubes on an old radio? It's got to sound pretty nice.
Yeah, there is no better sound than to hear the 1940s music come through a console radio.
And there's no better ambient light in a dark room than the lights coming off the back of the tubes.
Exactly. It's just like what's that movie, The Christmas Story? At the very end, you got the lights out, the trees on, the snow's falling, the radio's on, the lights on. It's just the picturesque of radio. And just like I say, even my mother-in-law, my wife was from the Philippines, and my mother-in-law just got approved to come here last year.
Nice.
her mother grew up in that time of the 1940s and 50s music, and that's all she listened to. So my mother-in-law actually plays my station all day on my 1941 Zenith radio all day
That's
while I'm at
awesome.
work. She plays my radio station because it reminds her of her mother,
That's great.
which is great. I walk through the door when I come home, and 1940s music playing on my radio. I love it.
Ma, you're
It's
using
just
up
like
my bandwidth, Ma.
So yeah, and I get letters all the time from like the most ones that hit my heart the most is letters from people whose parents lived in that era, are dealing with dementia. And I get letters saying that, hey, when my parents listened to your radio station, it really helps their dementia because it brings them back to the time that they were the most happiest. So it just, I mean, it almost brings it almost brings a warm, fuzzy feeling, a tear to your eye, knowing that what I meant this radio station to be has gone beyond what I thought it would be. You know.
And there's something to that. We were having a discussion on my other podcast, the What's in Your Head podcast, the other day about the importance of music, and I brought up the fact that music embeds itself into one's memory so deeply that, whenever you hear a song, you think of a time in your life. Well, that is one of the few memories that does not get erased quickly from, I almost want to say victims of Alzheimer's, because they basically are victims. They're not in control of it. And that is the one sense of smell and thought through memories through songs are like the last remaining things for people suffering from Alzheimer's.
Yeah, and it's not only them. Like the lady that I told you with the two sons, they have. She wrote me a letter and said, hey, my sons, both of my sons have ADHD, and it really calms them when they're able to listen. And not only the Lone Ranger, they don't not only love listening to the Lone Ranger, they love listening to the other radio stations or the radio shows that I have playing. And when I created the station, I never knew that it would go that far. I knew that the people that love 1940s music would listen to it. Maybe some reenactors, maybe some people that immerse themselves in the 40s world as much as they can. But to get letters from people saying, "Hey, my kids love your show. Our whole family listens to your show." Or your radio station really helps my dad's dementia, and he starts remembering stories from back then, stuff like that. It really brings a sense of pride about the radio station and a sense of awe that I had no idea that it would have that kind of effect on people. I just did it for something fun. Hey, my buddy said, hey, I wish we had a 1940s radio station that played music and shows. And I said, okay, I'll create it. And it turned into something that actually helps people.
Two things. Here's a suggestion for Jeff, since he has the automobiles. Most 1930s and 40s era cars had two speakers in them at best. So you can go back to the old Bluetooth wireless speaker, turn on your radio station, throw it in the glove box, and it'll sound like it's coming out of the two dashboard speakers as you're driving down the street. So that'd be cool. And
or you can get the AM transmitter, and
Yep.
it's battery powered as well, and you can tune your car's radio.
Not only that, but any car within 50 feet will pick it up too.
Exactly.
The other thing I was going to say, oh, crikey. You kind of were reaching into it before, but then I stepped all over it. When it comes to the songs that you've acquired, obviously we all know the ones that we hear on every other playlist, every other service, but you've come across some stuff that you've never heard before that you've played. Is there any particular song that you were surprised by that maybe got feedback through email and Facebook by people saying, hey, I'd never heard that song before. Hey, who is it by? And like, it's kind of like the WLVM 1940s Radio Top 40 chart winner. Like, is there songs that you were surprised that people request or seem to like
no.
so much more?
Not really. I haven't really gotten emails about, hey, I've heard this song. What is it? The only one that I got email about, a guy emailed me, and there's a Canadian commercial that plays on the radio, and it says it's saying that you cannot live in these certain areas without a permit. You have to have a permit to live in these certain areas. And he wrote me, he goes, I have never heard about that before. I never heard that you had to have a permit in Canada to live in certain areas.
Awesome.
Do you have any more information on that? And I've looked everywhere. I looked everywhere. Maybe somebody listening to the show can enlighten me a little bit more on it. Yeah, I couldn't find anything on having to have permits to live in certain areas in Canada.
Jeff, you got anything?
I'm just, I can't say it enough. My hat's off to you, man. It's just such an incredible idea, and just listening to the impact that you've made in such a short amount of time. I mean, that's just in just 2 short years. My mind thinks, what is this going to be like 5-10 years from now? You know, and like I said, this era, it seems in contemporary times can be extremely misunderstood. It can be very stereotyped. So for the people who truly do appreciate it, understand it for what it is, you know, like I said, with these other things that are kind of being under attack because all of a sudden it is what it is. Okay. We live in today's day. So to know that, you know, like I said, there's somebody like you that's keeping their memory alive. I mean, you've done more. It doesn't matter what uniform Don and I put on. It doesn't matter what living history event. It doesn't matter how much brass we bust, you know, trying to keep history alive. You've done it from the comforts of your home in just such an amazing way that it's awesome. We're just so glad to have you on the team and to have you on. And I hope every one of our listeners has already or will check you out and start getting you some airtime, because it's unbelievable. You know, just you don't advertise. You don't really.
Nor do we.
Yeah, no, it's been more of word of mouth. You know, I'll try and throw some things up on Facebook groups. You know, here and now.
It's so hard with Facebook.
Yeah, you know, if we have a special show coming up, or if we have the World Series coming up, you know, I'll throw up some advertisements about that. But you know, it's more, this radio station has been more of word of mouth, and it's for people that really want to listen to it, really want to have that immersion into the 1940s world. You know, I'm not saying that I'm not open to anybody listening to it, because you know, I would love everybody in the world to listen to 1940s music and see the specialness that, you know, that music has. But yeah, I mean, I really don't do a lot of advertising. I don't, you know, do any advertising on other radio stations or TVs, or you know, the most advertising I do is on Facebook or you know, Instagram.
Now, earlier you hinted around that your house has a lot of 40s themed stuff in there. What is the most, I don't want to say extreme, but I've seen, you know, cats who go as far as even their everyday refrigerator is from the era. What is the one of your modern day appliances that you have swapped out for the 40s precursor to that maybe your wife gets annoyed with?
You know, my wife has been very, very very on board with my love for the 1940s. So she really doesn't get annoyed at all. When we did move into the house, I tried to push her towards getting a vintage refrigerator and maybe a vintage range, but she didn't like that idea. So we've got a modern day fridge, and when we finally swap out the range that we have now that came with the house, she loves the style of the vintage ranges. So yeah. I might win on that one, but she loves the Victorian period. Like, our couches are Victorian. I've got a 1940s wingback chair that is you know, it's daddy's chair. The man in the house always had his chair, right? Yep. He came home from work and he had his cigar and his drink in his chair, read the evening paper. But yeah, so most of our furniture is 1940s or styled in the 1940s or Victorian area.
You know, is your old lady a baker? She like to bake things?
She loves to bake and she loves to cook.
Because that KitchenAid stand-up mixer hasn't changed much in the last 80 years. It looks like the 1940s model, so you can pick her up one of those, and she would not be upset. Get one of those bad boys put in the kitchen.
Oh yeah, she loves the vintage utensils. Like we found a vintage egg beater, so she loves using that. Yeah, so the mixer might have to be next.
Two things. I'm probably one of the last people you'll ever meet who can say they smashed their thumb on a wringer washer. Growing up poor in Kentucky, we lived in my family's farmhouse that had been around from the 1800s. And because I was born in 78, so it's the early 80s. My mom was struggling at the time, and she went down in the barn, and they still had the freestanding porcelain tub washer with the wringer in it. And you just plug it in, you fill it up with the water from the water hose, and then when it was done, you'd run it through the two wheels. And I was like 6, I got my thumb stuck in there, put it on reverse. And so I had the luxury of using a wringer washer in the 1980s. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, I done lost track now. But yeah, wringer washer, my thumb. Oh, that's what I was going to say. One of the things we all like as historians and antique collectors, and we hear it all the time, things don't last the way they used to. Things don't last the way they used to. We live in a disposable society, which is true. I cut the cord not too long ago, and I have Roku TVs, and on the Roku channel, they play Price is Right, the Bob Barker era, 24 hours a day. And so you're watching the Showcase Showdown, and they show this refrigerator from 1974 or 1980, and depending on how early it is. And so you're trying to adjust for inflation. Like, okay, well, that would be $900 nowadays, so that would be $300 back then. No, refrigerators were freaking expensive back then. A lot of that stuff was because, and also the thing too, like if you guys watch Stranger Things, like if you're in your 30s or 40s, you watch Stranger Things or that movie with Jessica Biel, I think it was Cookie or something, where she ended up killing her neighbor, takes place in the 80s. Like I'm watching those shows and I'm like, my mom had that, my grandmother had that, and you realize, oh, it's not because that stuff was popular, it's because they had less manufacturers making crap, and so everybody's house had the same coffee table, the same cotton owl, the same fisheye mirror with the eagle on top. We all had that same stuff, but it was all expensive because things weren't mass produced like they are nowadays. And so sometimes you'll think, okay, this is 30 years ago, the value of the dollar was less, and so you put a lowball price on it. It's like, no, a refrigerator in 1978 is about as much as that Samsung stainless steel 2-door freezer on the bottom is nowadays, and that's why it lasts. It's insane.
Yeah, exactly. And back then people had more respect for the things that they had, because especially those that grew up in the Depression, they had more respect for what they had. And yeah, I mean, you can say that things were made to last back then because you had radio repairmen, you had refrigerator repairmen, you had a repairman for everything. But more of why everything lasted so long back then was because people had respect for what they had. They didn't just, oh, hey, I could go walk down the store and get another toaster, and they throw that one away. No, you couldn't just go down the store in those days and buy another toaster. If you go to my website, WLVN1940s Radio.com, there is a section on that website and it's called Fun Facts. And you can see it in 1943, how much a house cost, how much a car cost, what the average wage was during there. And you'll see that, a car may have cost $900, but back then you were only making $900 to $1,000 a year.
Let's put Jeff on the spot. I'm actually on your website. Jeff, what was the cost of a brand new home in 1943?
I'm going to say, let's see, 1943, you could get a Dodge.
No, we're talking house right now. We're new house.
I'm going to say $5,000 to $7,000.
$3,600 for a price of a new home. What was the average annual income? So if a house cost $3,600, what do you think the average wages per year were?
1,500, 1,400,
Close, $2,000.
$2,000.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
How bad would we love to pay $40 a month in rent?
Oh my God.
I remember in 1999, before I moved to California, I was only paying $450 a month for a 2-bedroom townhouse on the west side of Columbus. Boy, those were the days. Cost a gallon of gas, 15 cents. The average price of a new car, $900. Bottle of Coca-Cola was 5 cents. Yeah, I love when you see the old photos of how much it costs to outfit a soldier. It's like, I wish I could get an M1 Garand for $12.38.
Not going to find that around anymore.
Once again, that is WLVN1940s Radio.com. And you have like 3 apps, right? 3 cell phone based apps.
Yeah, so we got the website, WLVN1940s Radio.com. We have the YouTube page. So if you just Google WLVN 1940s Radio, and then we have the Facebook page, WLVN 1940s Radio Facebook group and page. But you can also listen on many different radio platforms, such as getmeradio.com or Radio Box, radio.net. There's a lot of platforms that not only did I sign up for, but I'll search WLVN radio and all of a sudden there's platforms that show up that I never even signed up for. So I don't know how that happened, but there are many different radio platforms, not just on the on the website that you can listen to. And I've got my most favorite ones listed on the radio station that I found are most that they work the best. You don't lose connectivity that much. So.
Speaking of websites, once you're done visiting WLVM1940sradio.com, head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. We have been putting a lot of work into our website. I have been posting a lot more stuff on our Instagram page. If you haven't seen our Instagram page, I'm trying to post on there twice daily now, different content. But head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. Jeff's working on a thing where we're going to start kind of listing links to our eBay auctions for some of our World War II material that we're trying to get rid of. As we said a few weeks ago, we have World War II vet information resources. If you're trying to look up your family members, people who have served, we have our page of those who were there. Those are shortcuts to the interview podcast we've done with veterans and people who lived during the time. For you living historians, maybe you're just getting into the hobby. You want to know, well, where can I get some of this stuff? Go to our page, click on Quartermaster, and I have links to the primary sources for living history gear. Plus, whenever we come across cool stuff that maybe you never heard of before, like the K Canvas Liquid Blanco that you want to use on your Marine Corps webbing, your haversack, your webbing, it's the right shade. It's pretty much the same material that they used back then to treat your web gear. We have links there. We have links to the We Stand Alone reproduction stuff. So if you're trying to find some cool material to fill in your impressions for your next living history event, you can find that information there. We have all our mail call emails for people who sent us email. Speaking of which, we want to hear from you. Send us an email to mailcall@WTSPWorldWar2.com. That is WWII.com. And while you're there, click on the Patreon link on the homepage. It says support the cause. Back the Attack. Well, actually, Back the Attack will take you to our clothing where you can get shirts like the one Jeff's wearing or the ones I'm usually wearing, including our new What's the Scuttlebutt meatball logo, as Jeff likes to call it, with the guy with the canteen. And then Patreon link is right on the homepage. Please like and sign up for Patreon. It'll cost you $1 a month. We're waiting to hear back from the sponsor. We're going to have 2 more giveaways coming up over the next month and a half. We're just waiting to hear about the prizes per se that we're going to be giving away. If they come through, it's going to be very exciting. So you definitely want to head over to Patreon, sign up. It's $1 a month. That goes a long way to support what we do here. As Tony knows, these passion projects do come with a price tag and some overhead. And yes, they are minimum compared to other businesses people run, but it is overhead nonetheless. It does come out of the pockets and the family income of the people who run them. So if you enjoy our content and Tony's content, I'm sure he has ways you can support his projects. And the way you can support us is either sign up through Patreon or, kind of my reference earlier about living in a modern day second round of the recession or depression. Money's tight. I get it. Just watch our YouTube videos. Doesn't cost you a dime. We are monetized. And for every video you watch, you might scrape us together half a penny, but that all adds up. So you can support us that way as well. And so before we end the show, we're going to do what we've always do, and that's the beloved segment of the show. What you reading? Jeff, what you reading?
Don, I thought you would never ask. I have been waiting to talk about this book for quite some time. We have talked about it on the show. I haven't. The fellow who did 15 years worth of research that made this book possible is the one who talked about it. And I'm talking about our good friend Dennis Blocker, who's been on our show multiple times, not just as a guest, but as a co-host. He's really helped fill the gap and back the attack, you might say. So thank you, Dennis, for that. But Heart of Hell. This is the book that Dennis referenced multiple times on the show, the story of his grandfather and what he did and his buddies did on LCI Gunboat 449 in the shadows of Mount Suribachi at Iwo Jima 2 days before the Marines landed. The LCI gunboats were charged with deploying the underwater demolition teams, Navy frogmen, to go in and clear the lanes for the Marines to hit 2 days later on the 19th of February. And unfortunately, these 8 boats were completely devastated by Japanese fire from Mount Suribachi and the beaches. So it is an unbelievable story. You're going to get to know these guys. Mitch Weiss is the Pulitzer Prize winning author of this book. Dennis did the research. Mitch is the one that pushed it out. You're going to feel like you know them. You're going to feel like you know what their laugh sounds like. You're going to feel like you know what these rooms smell like, the cigar smoke, playing cards. And I want to read, if we got a minute, I'd like to read 2 quick excerpts because it has to do with radio.
Before you do, re-say the name, because as so it happens, your audio dropped out when you said the name, and there's people at home listening. What's the name of the damn book, Jeff? So give the name of the.
That's all I've got to say about that.
Yeah, give the name of the book, and then you can read your excerpts.
Heart of Hell. The Heart of Hell by Mitch Weiss, the untold story of courage and sacrifice in the shadow of Iwo Jima. Again, it's about an LCI gunboat crew at Iwo Jima. Unbelievable story. So I can set the scene real quick. There is an officer by the name of Byron Yarborough who is writing letters to a Betty Jones in Cordell, Georgia. Betty is a friend of a sister of one of Yarborough's buddies, and his buddy noticed that Yarborough's not really getting a whole lot of mail from back home. And just like we mentioned on the show many times, how important mail is. So he said, hey,
is this a sympathy letter book? Is this a sympathy letter book? A guy felt sorry for his buddy, and he I'll send you, you can have my allowance for the next 5 years if you send my friend Steve a letter.
Well, it was quite an impactful offer, apparently, because Byron Yarborough and Betty Jones have gotten very close. I'm not finished the book, so I'm not. There's no spoiler alerts we have to go through here. But just to set the tone, Byron, as his buddy says, assumes the Betty letter pose quite often when he's writing these letters. He's writing a letter now almost once a day. He's receiving a letter almost every other day from Betty. They've never met. They have no idea. They just met through letters, and they feel like they know each other. And every letter, they divulge a little bit more personal information about their families, about their just what they like. What are they interested in? And this friendship is really, really developing. So Byron's pretty fond of this girl, and he signed off his last letter, "Love, Byron," hoping she would notice the love part. So in her last letter, Betty had asked Yarborough what kind of music he liked and more details about his family. He said he liked big band music. They had just gotten some V-disc records, and I'm having a good time trying to learn all the new songs. They sound sort of funny at first, but then you get better with each playing. I like Glenn Miller's Poinciana and Fellow on a Furlough. Do you like popular music? Skipping ahead, much of Byron's use of love excited her. Betty wasn't ready to write that herself. She couldn't let him think her overly forward. She knew he could read it clearly enough between the lines. She folded the letter to the sound of violins, followed by Frank Sinatra's smooth baritone. She stopped. When Your Lover Has Gone was one of her favorite numbers, a torch song with melancholy lyrics. When You're Alone, the magic moonlight dies. But tonight, Betty didn't feel sad at all. No, she was hopeful. When Byron returned, they'd be together. She was sure of it. Many of these letters that you're going to read when you read The Heart of Hell, these are quoted. Mitch quotes, he pulls a lot from these actual letters between Byron Yarborough and Betty Jones. And as you're reading through, you will see how important the music is, the things that they like, the same songs, the same type of music they like. And I thought that was just wonderfully fitting with our guest tonight with Tony here from WLVN. Again, man, well done. Awesome what you're doing. Loving it. Gonna give you as much airtime as possible and as much advertising as possible, because it's like I said, it's that much deeper. You can wear the pants, and you can know the lingo, and you can bust your thumb in an M1 Garand.
But it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
There you go.
Hey, you need to go to like antique stores and look for these V-discs, because I'm looking at it here on Wikipedia. It said many V-discs contain spoken word introductions by band leaders and musicians wishing good luck and prayers to soldiers. Glenn Miller in December 1943 introduced a record by saying, "This is Captain Glenn Miller speaking from the Army Air Force Training Command Orchestra, and we hope that you soldiers and allied forces enjoy these V-discs that we're making just for you." It'd be cool to get those and like lop off the V-disc reference, but kind of have them be openers to the songs that they sing. That'd be kind of cool to include on your station.
Oh, actually, I have a whole load of V-discs files, and if you listen every 7 p.m. Mountain Time, let me put that 7 p.m. Mountain Time, I have the Glenn Miller show for a half an hour. That's just Glenn Miller music, and you will hear some of those V-discs played. And just like you read out, this is Captain Glenn Miller. This song is for all of you fellas out there that are missing their girls back home, and they have those introductions, and every V-disc will have those kind of introductions. You could have one from Judy Garland, Judy Garland introduction, or a Benny Goodman introduction, a Bunny Berrigan introduction. It's very, very unique for these service members, and it was that morale boost that they had, that hey, we're not forgotten over there. It's that connection, and that's what music was back then, and that's what radio was back then. It was a connection, and that's what people craved. Nowadays we have forgotten that connection. Our connection is through video games or social media, and it's just and that's the times. We're here on YouTube, or in my state, I have a Facebook page and whatnot, and it's just the times. It's our time. That's what our time is. But back then they didn't have that stuff. Their connection was through letters, through radio, and just like if you Google G.I. Jane, the G.I. Jane, or G.I. Jill, sorry, G.I. Jill show, soldiers would actually write into the G.I. Jill, G.I. Jive show and request songs. And before she played these songs, and she was a female DJ, before she played these songs, she would read out, "This is from Sergeant Joe Smith from ship FPO AE whatever, or from the 101st Airborne Station in France right now," and then she would play those songs. So it was a connection that these servicemen had to their families back home, and their families had a connection to their soldiers over there. When they hear their soldier's name on the radio, hey, this Joe Smith is requesting this song, and Joe Smith's wife is listening, or mother is listening, just hearing that name, just knowing that he physically wrote into that radio station to play this song, was proof that he's still alive, he's still safe. It was that connection back then that a lot of people don't get.
Real quick, because I have a short refresh rate on my memory. I am going to ask you what you're reading. You didn't get out of that, but there's a cat on TikTok. He has a voice. He's a short little guy, has the center part, but he sings just like the 1930s voice. "Set the world on fire," and he plays the banjo and all this. But he found this company, and I'll have to go find the video, and I'll send you a link to it. There's a company who got a bunch of like old school handsets, like modern day handsets, but from landline phones that no one can sell anymore. And what they did is they reversed the polarity, and they put a standard microphone input connector on the speaker side, thus turning it into a microphone, and it gives it that 1930s, 1940 radio microphone sound. And they sell these.
Oh.
They sell them with the input on them, and you can plug them in. And he was talking into it like a microphone, and it gives you that 1930s, 1940s sound. And I guess they sell these hand receivers that way. And I'll try to track down the website and send it to you. You might be able to recreate old commercial break shoes, and it might sound pretty cool on your radio station.
Oh, that would be great for the live event that I'm trying to create for the Arizona ground crew.
I guess some audiophiles discovered because of the low quality speaker they would use in those old handsets. You know, just the white ones that you would hang up on the on the base on your wall. They literally plug it into the speaker instead of the microphone, and it gives you that tinny voice sound. It's pretty cool.
Oh wow, that would be awesome.
So, hey Tony, what you reading?
Well, right now I am reading the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I kind of go in waves. So sure. I spent maybe 3 or 4 months studying on the Pacific theater, and now I'm working on the European theater. Before that, I was working on the German Air Force and the American Air Force. So I kind of go in waves. But the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich is actually written by a correspondent that lived in Germany before Hitler came to power and through the war. So it's a very well written out, and it's funny. Every so often he'll throw his own little opinion in on some of the higher rank Nazi officials that he has actually met before the war started.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very interesting to hear this guy's opinion on Goebbels or on Goering. It's really interesting. But one book that I do have to really put on a soapbox out there, if nobody's read it, I'm sure every historian and every World War II lover has read it, but if nobody's read this story, A Higher Calling.
Mm-hmm.
So
was that you or Henry was talking about that not too long ago, wasn't it? Was it Henry who was talking about that, Jeff? So I think that came up on the show not too long ago. Somebody was reading it, I think.
Are we talking Makos's book, A Higher Call?
A Higher Call, yes.
Oh gosh, yeah, we talk about that all the time. I just heard from Adam a couple days ago, as a matter of fact.
Oh wow.
We talk A Higher Call. I talk about that book all the time. I'm glad you brought that up. Makos he's been a guest on WTSP before, and we stay in contact with him pretty regularly and follow his projects. And of course, after Higher Call, you have to read Spearhead. You got to read Devotion, even though I get it post World War II. But we give Adam Makos a lot of love here at WTSP, and it's well deserved because he's the man for sure.
Oh yes,
and he's also a new Southwest Florida resident. He lives about 45 minutes from here, so he's a neighbor now.
Y'all can have that heat. I like my cool temperatures here in Montana.
My brother did about 10 years in Big Sky before he moved to Vegas. Beautiful country. I was out there.
Absolutely.
1995, I think. It was the last time I was in Montana, but I enjoyed it while I was there. Before we wrap it up, Jeff, you got any plugs or anything you want to get out down the pike that's coming up your way?
If it's not too premature and, Lord willing, the creek doesn't rise and AT&T towers don't fall, next Monday, I'm excited to announce our guest for next Monday. For people who are listening now, make sure you tune in. We are going to have a good friend of mine come on who is an incredible General MacArthur / FDR reenactor, impersonator. He is the West Coast MacArthur out of Culver City, California. You can probably do a deep dive on my social media to find some pictures of him that him and I have done at different living events, history events here in Texas and Wings Over Dallas Air Show, things like that. So I just wanted to give a little whet the appetite for next Monday. He's just an incredible guy, and like I said, he is the man when it comes to MacArthur for sure.
And I want to give a real quick shout out to Standard Issue Coffee. I got my bag of Night Ops dark roasts coming in. I'm going to take us to work tomorrow and consume it there, where I go through about 4 cups of black coffee each day. And we want to
Get
thank
your WTSP mug.
in my WTSP mug, and I want to thank Mr. Tony Liotta for coming on. He's from WLVN1940s Radio. You can find that over at WLVN1940sradio.com. Tony, you have anything you got coming down the pike you want to promote?
Nothing yet. It's summertime, so we don't have a lot of high traffic radio stations going on. But come the end of September and in October, we got the Great Gildersleeve back, and Jack Benny will start again in October. So if you're a Jack Benny and a Great Gildersleeve star, or Burns and Allen fan, make sure you guys tune in starting in October. They will be back from vacation then.
I totally blanked on the name, but I was trying to look it up real quick, but I couldn't remember. About 4 or 5 years ago, I came across, it wasn't Benny Goodman, it was another clarinet fella. He's playing a song, I think he wrote it in like 39, but it was like literally, the Beatles took that entire riff. It was like the first time I heard a song of that era that a modern day band had stole the riff from. It was like clearly a Beatles song. I wish I remember what the hell it was, but if I ever come across it, I'll send it to you, and you can compare the two and get a good laugh, because
Absolutely.
I was listening to it one day. But we want to thank you for coming on the show, and thank each and every one of you for supporting what we do here over at WTSP. For myself, Mr. Jeff Copsetta, and Tony Liotta. We will talk to you all next week, and this is what you call stretching, because I forgot to pull this up, and here we go.
This has been a Digital 410